Hello, hello. Welcome Monday. Hi, how are you? This is Linda Downey, and I am here. This is an episode of The Unconditioned Life where we talk about things that can make a difference for your stress, for your health, even for your relationships, because it really is all about how you've conditioned yourself to live and where's that working for you and where isn't it. So what I do as a transformational health coach is I help women overcome stress and overwhelm and the pain of their past so that they can create a vibrant and joyful future. So that's what you're listening to. And today's conversation, first of all, is being played in multiple places. So please say hello and share where you're from. And today's conversation is about burnout, stress, overwhelm, and even burnout, which is a degree beyond just being overwhelmed. So we're going to talk about that. How does that process happen? What's really going on? And where you can look to see how your stress and overwhelm could be mitigated. So again, please say hello if you pop in or if you watch the replay, and I'll definitely check all the comments later. So it's always makes me so happy to connect with you and have these conversations. So I hope that this is insightful for you. So burnout, the title of this episode is Burnout, right? And burnout is really when you're so stressed, so overwhelmed that you're at the point of almost apathy. Like if you've ever been burned out, ever really felt burned out, I would love for you to just say, yep, been there. I certainly have been. And there's almost like a numbness, like an apathy there, even with things like the things that used to really light you up. I can remember, so I've always been a health and wellness person. I've always been into fitness. My background, I have a master's in exercise physiology. So fitness was always my thing. And when I was going through the most stressful, overwhelming time of my life and burned out, the thought of even exercising was like, it didn't bring me joy and happiness. It only brought me more stress because I wasn't doing it the way that I had set my life up to do it. So burnout is really when you're not even experiencing joy anywhere in your life, especially the things that used to bring you joy, like the things that you used to know yourself to love, who you knew yourself to be, don't even light you up. To me, that's really when you're burned out. There's just no energy left for anything. So if you're like a mom who's always was the mom who had the best birthday parties for the kids and did Halloween costumes, and you can barely get their lunch made now, like that, that's burnout, when there's just nothing left for the things that you enjoy. So what I wanted to do was kind of define burnout in that way, because I think the apathy and the lack of joy is important. That really lets you know you're at a point in life where life is just really not workable. Stress is sort of the beginning of the continuum, at least in my mind, the way I sort of understand it all, right? If there's a spectrum or a continuum, stress is where we start. And stress is where, we're feeling the crunch a little bit. Life is feeling like pressed and rushed and a lot of obligations and things that need to be done. It might feel a lot like scheduling issues or overcommitting issues, like that, just stress. Or maybe even things like financial issues or issues in a relationship, like with communication, things like that. But that's the beginning of the spectrum. And then as we get further stressed or more circumstances sort of pile on, we go from just being stressed to actually feeling really overwhelmed. Like, I used to be able to handle stuff, but now I can't get through my day and get it all done. I'm overwhelmed with either my commitments or my, like scheduling commitments, or I'm overwhelmed with what I feel is my burden. Like I've got to keep it together for my partner, for my kids, at work, where all of my roles, the roles feel like overwhelming. Like there's no room in between these roles for me. So that's like further down the line from stress in the way that I kind of visualize it for myself. And then burnout is even further down the line, which if you're just hopping on now, first of all, say hello. But I defined burnout when I started as a place where really apathy and no joy lives. When you're in burnout, you just almost don't care. You certainly are not present to feeling joy or any of those uplifting emotions. There's just nothing left, right? People, if you've had adrenal fatigue or heard of the adrenals or my adrenals are shot, that's like the body part that goes along with how life is feeling. But there's a part when you get to that burnout where the adrenals do say, you know what, we've been doing too much for too long, we're actually going to shut down now. That's one of the ways that the body tries to protect itself, because the nervous system recognizes the adrenals have been overtaxed and pumping out cortisol. Like when we started at the beginning of the spectrum and we were stressed and then we were into overwhelm, those adrenals trying to keep up, trying to keep up, trying to keep up. And then there's a point where they sort of are like done, because the body recognizes if we keep pumping out cortisol at that level, there's going to be big problems. There's problems in the body with that, because cortisol will disrupt the thyroid hormone. Oh, hi, Dan. Thanks for saying hi. I love when people say hi. So cortisol, if you're not living where cortisol is in its natural rhythm throughout the day, it's going to start to cause problems. Cortisol in and of itself is not a problem. It's actually required for life. Cortisol is a very important hormone. The problem is when it's being pumped out all the time, all day long. And at some point, hey, Facebook user, it says Facebook user, so I don't know who you are, but hi. At some point, the body says this level of cortisol is going to be a problem and it shuts down. And it's at that point where burnout is happening, because that cortisol kind of flattens. And we used to call it, when I was really practicing functional health and doing a lot of diet and supplements and all of that, we were calling it adrenal fatigue. There has been a movement away from calling it adrenal fatigue, because it's really not, it's just a different way of looking at it. But the adrenals actually, the nervous system actually purposely shuts down as a protective mechanism. Because if you stayed in that elevated, overwhelmed nervous system place, your body would just really crash. And it kind of feels like it crashes anyway, but that's burnout. So I wanted to talk about why that happens, because you could say that the way our modern world is and our culture, there's a drive to live and keep up with everything. The kids have 9 million practices and everybody works and all of that. So I get that. There are real logistical things to deal with, but there's also the driving force behind it. And that's where I go to work. That's what I want to really uncover in this conversation, because people, I think, are only noticing the scheduling and the logistics and not what's behind it. So here's what I mean. When we are growing up, I'm going to say in childhood, when we're very young and we have to deal with something, we find a way of dealing with it. We find a way of coping to make it work. And when it works, we go, oh, that worked. I'm going to keep doing that. So it might be we were in a situation or an environment where, so I'll use myself as an example. My father was an alcoholic. So the environment in my household was alcoholism. And this is very common for children growing up in an alcoholic household is, I'm going to take care of the parent that needs help. I'm going to step up and do more because there's a gap here that needs to be filled. Now, as a 5-year-old, you're not thinking like that, but you're responding in your heart and in your spirit and in your being. You're responding to what you see is needed in the house. You're responding to that parent that you so love and what it's going to take to make them feel better, to make them happy with you. It might be you have a parent who's very angry all the time. So the way to make them not be angry is to try to be as perfect as you can. Try to be quiet and not rock the boat. So you do that as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, and it works, right? You can see that the household sort of is like a little bit better than it was, or you get some feedback from your parent, or you get some sort of messaging that worked. And so now you develop this way of being in the world. You develop this way of coping. So now you're an adult and there's some stress. There's things to deal with. And that automatic coping mechanism shows up. Oh, the thing I need to do right now is to take care of it all. And then everybody's okay. So we take care of it all. What are some other things that we do? We just really, really hustle all day long for acknowledgement from those around us. So it might be from our team at work. It might be from our partner at home, but we're hustling in order to get acknowledgement. And that's because that's the way we learned how to make life work. The problem, though, is at some point it may keep life working, but we're not working anymore. Our bodies are not working. That's why the adrenals are like taking a nosedive and the nervous system is really put to the max and doesn't even remember how to come out of rest. But we're also not connected to ourself because we're so busy out here coping. What do I need to do to make it work? What do I need to do to make everybody else be okay? What do I need to do to get the acknowledgement? That comes from, we didn't get the acknowledgement when we were little. What we got was the message that we had to step up. That's what we got. We didn't get the acknowledgement that we were fine just the way we were. We got the message that we needed to be quiet and not tip off the anger. We got the message that controlling things is the way to feel better because it didn't feel good in our house as young people when things were out of control. So we learned that controlling things, keeping our mouth shut, stepping up and doing it for others, these are all very common ways. But what happens, ways of coping, let me finish the sentence. But what happens is life is continuing to show up. And when that's the way that we know how to do life, we're getting more and more stressed and we're feeling more and more overwhelmed. So if you don't know a lot about me, I, for 15 years, was taking care of my second child. So my son was a 2-year-old, my daughter was born, and she was born right into catastrophic medical issues, open heart surgery on the night she was born. So in our household, the circumstances kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The money issues around medical costs were huge. My husband had children from a previous marriage. There were issues around them. So the circumstances kept getting bigger and bigger. My way of coping that I learned as a young person was definitely, I need to control. I need to control the situation because then I'll feel safe. So I'm trying to control more and more and more. And in the process, getting more and more and more overwhelmed because it's not possible to control life. It's not possible. If you've been trying to control your life, you're feeling more stressed to the point where we get burned out. And that might be if you've ever heard of fight, flight, or freeze, right? The freeze part can be an element of burnout where you're just numb. You're just numb. You don't remember what it feels like to be happy and joyful and carefree. You don't remember what it feels like to go through the day, letting the day unfold. without the white knuckled grip of I've got to have the possible response for everything. I've got to think of every scenario before it happens so I'm prepared with the worst case scenario solution. I've got to remember I've got 4 kids and I've got to think of what each one of them needs to do. When they're super little, we need to do that. But let's just say they're 4 kids in middle school and high school, and I'm out in front of each of their lives because I think I need to control the situation. One of the things that I learned from being a child of an alcoholic is that loving someone but not being attached to saving them is the way that I can save myself. And it actually holds true for my daughter as well. Loving someone, when you grow up in a disrupted childhood household, I'll use the word trauma because it's being used everywhere now, but your childhood is disrupted from alcoholism or from other things, a divorce, a single parent, just grown-ups who are really challenged in how they run the household, then we learn, or we think we learn, what we learn and what we think is real is that loving someone means saving them. But in my own work with getting myself back connected to me, is that I can love someone and not save them, but just be here as the container of love for them. So as a parent, that's a really critical distinction, because if you're loving your kids, but needing to control their outcome, needing to save them from their own learning experiences, you now disempower them and you. You take away their power as growing human beings who get the opportunities to have lessons, and you take away your power as someone who is loving with open arms and also being connected to self. So if this is resonating with you, and I don't know if I can see all the comments, but just let me know, like, yeah, I've been overwhelmed. Yeah, I've done the parenting in that way, or I've been with a partner and shown up that way, or I grew up in an alcoholic household and that is what we did. Because that is leading you to burnout. When we're loving, but the love requires saving, when we're loving, but needing to control, when we are loving, but we are shutting off our own needs, not speaking up with what we need, when we're loving with an attachment to the outcome, that gets us to burnout. It doesn't get us to the outcome that we're hoping for. It gets us to burnout, and it robs us and the people that we're loving from their best life experience, because the life experience is meant to teach us and to grow us. And if I'm controlling what's happening for everyone around me, I'm not giving them those experiences. And I'm not giving myself the experience of joy. I'm only giving myself the experience of work and effort. And it all comes back to what I learned when I was a child. So that's the perspective that I wanted to put. It's not about changing your schedule. It's not about delegating better, although those are things you could put in place. But first, you've got to really look at your programming from your childhood. You've got to look at your coping and what your automatic programming is that kicks in, and especially when you're stressed, because it's easy to look at it and to try something else when life is going along pretty easy, right? When you have no kids, you can sort of try different things. When you have a child who's in the hospital, very difficult. So it's easier to take on reprogramming, rewiring how you think, and learning different coping skills when you're not in the thick of it. But life might feel like you're always in the thick of it. So then it doesn't make sense to like wait, because you're always going to be there. You're going to keep slamming your adrenals until you're in shutdown and burnout. So, but that's when we want to be able to have the tools, is when the next level of circumstances are going to show up. That's when you need the tools, right? So, yeah. So if this is making sense to you, whether you grew up in an alcoholic household or not, whether you grew up in a household where there was a lot of anger, parents were really fighting, there wasn't really a lot of space for you to get what you needed, for you to get the message that you're fine just the way you are. Children need to know they're fine just the way they are when they're 5 and 6 and 9 years old, not get the message that they have to take care of the grown-ups. But the kids, especially kids, because they're so sensitive to their parents' emotions and to the energy that's going on in the house, they will step up. My son so stepped up when Charlotte, my daughter, was in the hospital, and he was little. He was 8, 9 years old, and we had to really coax him out of taking on a role that he didn't need to take on. But nobody coaxed me out of that when I was little. That was something I needed to learn and do the work on as an adult, and you may as well. So if that's the case, that's a lot of the work that I do. I do a lot of energy work. I do emotional clearing work with people. I do the spiritual part, because it is the mind, body, spirit. It's how you think. It is your emotions and the emotions that you hold, and it is your connection to your spiritual self that needs to be in alignment if you don't want to live your life burned out and overwhelmed. So that's all of the work that I do. But there's a program, I'm actually shifting the name of it and revamping it a little bit, that will be launched in March. So it's going to be Return to You, because it is all about returning back to you instead of the coping programming that you developed. No, returning to the true self of who you are, so that you can love without saving, so that you can love and be a container of love for people without trying to do their life for them and exhausting yourself in the process. So if you're interested in that, drop me a message, and I can give you the details about that. And if there's any other topics that you want to have a conversation on, I'm always thinking of, what do I want to talk about in the next episode? But I want to talk about the things that are important to you. So please also leave me a message on that. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I'll be looking for your comments everywhere that this is. And if you watch the replay, I'll be looking for that. And I'm just wishing you a non-overwhelmed, non-burned out rest of your day. How's that? Okay. Have a good one.